إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وينفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما يا ذا الجلال والإكرام. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Heart Part 12. Jazakallah for coming out. The Prophet ﷺ says, Man salaka tariqan yaltamisu fihi ilman sahhalallahu lahu bihi tariqan ila al-jannah. Whoever sets out on a path to seek knowledge, Allah makes the path to Jannah easy for them. So may Allah accept, inshallah. Just to start off where we ended the last time, we discussed that basically the human being is comprised of two parts, the physical and the spiritual, and that the interface between these two systems, what modern science has discovered is language. What neuroscientists have discovered is that when a man or person is thinking to him or herself, all the centers of the brain involved in speech are activated. So there is a dialogue going on within ourselves. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes this for us 1400 years ago. He says, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ وَنَعْلَمُ مَا تُوَسْوِسُ بِهِ نَفْسُهُ. Indeed, we created man, and we know what he whispers to himself. وَنَحْنُ أَقْرَبُ إِلَيْهِ مِنْ حَبْلِ الْوَرِيدِ. And we closer to him than his own jugular vein. Now, what's the purpose of this dialogue? We know that the main component of our existence is what we would call our soul. And the soul is basically our eternal part. It's what should give meaning to the experiences that we have. So we used the example the last time. We said if you're driving on the road, for example, and a car cuts you in, you can either let him go, or you can get upset and start saying all forms of obscenities to him. But in essence, the same stimulus will bring about two reactions. Now, what causes those two reactions is the choices that we made, or the meaning we decided to assign to those experiences. So just give you an example. I was sitting with my grandson this Sunday, and we were sitting at the river, and a boat came past with a tube, pulling a tube, and there were children screaming on the tube. And so he became alarmed, and he said, Dada, why people screaming? And I said, they're screaming because they're having fun. And immediately that concern turned to a smile, and he said, can you please take me on a boat on a tube? So as soon as he had different information, he assigned a different meaning to the experience, and all of a sudden, it was not something alarming to him anymore. So when we look at this slide, Epictetus is a Greek philosopher. He says, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. In another saying, he says, man is not disturbed by things, but by his view of them. So we control our responses. If we operate in a subconscious manner, then we become reactionary. But if we're mindful of everything that's happening to us, we can start to assign the correct meanings to our experiences. So last time we discussed that the the reason we're studying the Fatiha is because the Fatiha contains the language and the meaning that gives the spiritual heart the belief it requires to rule over the body and to secure light for ourselves in both realms. We said also that belief is the basis for the power of consciousness, as witnessed in the placebo effect. So we know the placebo effect is that when you believe something can benefit you, it benefits you. We've discussed this many times that often when people read the side effects of medication, they suffer from those side effects. And if you believe that something can help you, it won't help you. That's called the nocebo effect. But that's actually the power of our conscious mind. Now, Al-Fatiha, being the summary of the entire Qur'an, it holds all the meanings that the believer needs to strengthen and correct his inner language. And it is a cure. Remember, one of the names of the Fatiha is Ash-Shifa. It is a cure that one administers at least 17 times a day, providing one understands the meanings contained therein. We must understand what it is we are reciting. Thus, it is the source of the believer's strength and his shifa. So, the necessity for understanding the Fatiha, Imam Ahmad, he says, people need knowledge more than they need food and drink. Because they need food and drink 2 or 3 times a day, but they need knowledge all the time. For every single experience, we need to assign a meaning to it. And if we can remain conscious and assign the correct meaning to every experience, every single moment of our lives can become enjoyable and it can become an act of ibadah. So Ibn Qayyim, he says, a human's complete happiness is dependent upon the perfection and completion of 2 strengths of knowledge. The first one, authentic knowledge, which is knowledge of Allah, knowledge of His attributes, and knowledge of what He requires from us. And he says, and the second form of knowledge is firm determination of actions, meaning a way to translate that authentic knowledge into action, which is what we would call the Sunnah. So we know that the authentic knowledge is the Qur'an, and the firm determination of actions are the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Now, in opening Surah Al-Fatiha, this is what Ibn Qayyim, he says, the principles of guidance in Surah Al-Fatiha. He says the complete happiness of a human cannot be achieved except with a combination of these matters, meaning combining these 2 forms of knowledge. And they are included in Surah Al-Fatiha, and these matters are arranged in the best way. So when we look at Surah Al-Fatiha, from the time it opens, it's starting to give us the information we need in the exact order we need it. And when we look at Surah Al-Fatiha, we'll see that the first part of it contains the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the second part contains action. And the last part is a warning. If we have knowledge without action, and if we have action without knowledge, we become like, or we seek refuge from being the maghdubi alayhim. The maghdubi alayhim are the people that have knowledge, but no action, the Yahud. And the Dawlin are the Nasara, they had action, but no knowledge. And then we discussed in the last lesson something that Imam Ghazali, he said, I included it because some of the ladies wanted the slide, but I didn't have a chance to write it down and send it. But Imam Ghazali says, dear friend, your heart is a polished mirror. You must wipe it clean from the veil of dust that is gathered upon it, because it is destined to reflect the light of divine secrets. Now we know all positive attributes, forgiveness, patience, gratitude, love, kindness, forgiveness, compassion. Those are all qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when the human being, when he acts on one of these, he's actually reflecting one of the qualities of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and thereby he reflects the divine light. Now Imam Ghazali said 5 reasons a mirror will not reflect. He said the first reason, there's a defect in the mirror, and this he said is like a child that hasn't reached maturity yet. There is a defect in the mirror itself. Number 2, he said there could be dirt covering the mirror. Number 3, he said the angle of the mirror is not aligned to the object. And this, we said, is the example of the scientists and the atheists who work in these fields and see the wonders of Allah, but they never recognize it because their hearts are not directed towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And number 4, Imam Ghazali said that one of the reasons a mirror will not reflect is there is an obstacle between the mirror and the object. And what he said is this often takes the form of blind following. So if we take like the Christians, for example, they took Isa alayhi salam as a God besides Allah, na'udhu billah, and that becomes a barrier between them and this mirror. And lastly, he said the object is not in front of the mirror. So if you're not standing in front of the mirror, you can't see your reflection. So one of the purpose of these forms of knowledge is to clear the dirt on the mirror and then to place ourselves in front of the mirror. In fact, this is the purpose of taqwa. Taqwa is constantly directing our attention back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is one of the blessings of Ramadan. Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu kutiba alaykumus siyamu kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. That the purpose fasting was prescribed upon you like it was prescribed upon those before you is that you have taqwa, that your attention can be constantly focused back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now we come to Alhamdulillah. Now Alhamdulillah is a statement of praise. If I have to ask anyone here what does Alhamdulillah mean, the first thing you're going to say is, well, all praise is due to Allah, or all thanks is due to Allah, but we'll see that it doesn't do justice. But if somebody is suffering some illness, if somebody has just lost a loved one, if somebody has lost some material property, and you say, well, you should thank Allah. In some instances, they may say to you, well, why should I thank Allah? I'm actually under a difficult circumstance. Maybe many of us, we are so preoccupied with the upcoming elections, we in a constant state of anxiety. And we'd be thinking in our minds, well, what should we be saying Alhamdulillah for? But let's just look, first of all, at the wisdom for us having to say this. If we look at the story of Musa and Khidr, now, I think most of us are familiar, is that when Musa alayhi salam met Khidr and he asked Khidr, can I learn from you? Because Allah said to Musa, there's someone that has more knowledge than you. So Khidr said, it's fine, but you can accompany me, but don't ask me any questions. So when they got onto a boat, people gave them a ride on a boat free of charge. Before they disembarked, Khidr pulled out a plank from the boat. Basically made a hole in the boat. Now Musa alayhi salam is watching this with his own eyes. He is a witness, a first-hand witness to what Khidr is doing. Okay, and he says, لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا إِمْرَ, you did a terrible thing. Now just think of us, many times we see something on the YouTube or on the WhatsApp, you say, I saw it with my own eyes. But in this story, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us, even though Musa alayhi salam saw it with his own eyes, he didn't understand it. And in the next part of the story, when they journeyed, Khidr killed a young boy, innocent child. Musa alayhi salam was again a witness. لَقَدْ جِئْتَ شَيْئًا نُكْرًا. He said, now you did something even worse. And he is seeing it with his own eyes. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, you don't understand the wisdom. Now, what is it that we don't have? We don't have this two-dimensional understanding of the world. Imagine if we open a book and there's 2 pages. Now, here's the book laying in front of you. There's 2 pages. And whatever you do on the one page, there's something corresponding that's happening on the second page. But if the second page is actually the main page, if something comes up on this second page which is to your disadvantage, you're going to have to get the person to cancel it out on the first page, right? Because whatever is happening here is happening here. And if you want to cancel it here, you have to fix it up on the first page. So, if there's something happening or going to be disadvantageous to us in Akhirah, Allah gives us the opportunity to fix it up in this dunya. And this is what we find to be tribulations or difficulties or hardships. So in actual fact, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving us the difficulty to actually secure our benefit in the next dimension, then that musibah is a gift. So Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, disobedience that is followed by humility is better than obedience that's followed by, or better than blessing that's followed by forgetfulness. Now, we must be honest, many of us, we prefer to be in blessing with forgetfulness. This is our state, okay? And as soon as difficulty comes, then we in despair. In fact, Ibn Ata'illah, he says in one of his hikam, he says, indeed Allah can open for his servant a door to obedience without opening the door to acceptance. It's very important. He said, and Allah can allow his servant to fall into some error, which happens to lead him to the right path. So he says, indeed, disobedience, which is followed up by humility, is better than obedience, which fills you with vanity and arrogance. So we have to look at things in its proper perspective. Now let's look what Ibn al-Qayyim says. I mean, if you're someone that's having some kind of difficulty, look at this glad tidings he gives. He says, had Allah lifted the veil for his slave and shown him how he handles his affairs for him, and how Allah is more keen for the benefit of the slave than his own self. Let me just repeat that. And how Allah is more keen for the benefit of the slave than his own self. Allah is more concerned for us than we have for ourselves. His heart would have melted out of the love for Allah, and it would have been torn to pieces out of thankfulness to Allah. Therefore, if the pains of this world tire you, do not grieve. For it may be that Allah wishes to hear your voice by way of dua. So pour out your desires in prostration and forget about it, and know that verily Allah does not forget it. Ibn al-Qayyim further says, he says, if a person performs prayer, he's knocking at the door of Allah. He says, and know that when you knock at the door of Allah, Allah will open it for you. This is why Allah says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ista'inu bis-sabri was-salah. Oh, you who believe, seek Allah's help with patience and salah. وَإِنَّهَا لَكَبِيرَةٌ. And this is very difficult. إِلَّا عَلَى الْخَاشِعِينَ. Except the ones that have this deep respect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He further goes on to say, he says, from the perfection of Allah's ihsan is that He allows His slave to taste the bitterness of the break before the sweetness of the mend. So He does not break His believing slave except to mend him, and He does not withhold from him except to give him, and He does not test him except to cure him. So this is just from the spiritual part. Now we want to talk of something that affects every human being, which is called the negativity bias. Now what neuroscience has discovered is that human beings pay far more attention to negativity than to positivity. It's the way our brains are wired. It's part of our survival mechanism. Anything that threatens you, you need to remember it. So if it comes again, you can avoid it. So what they found is if they expose somebody to a positive experience, a negative one, and a neutral one. But what they find is that when human beings experience a negative experience, there's far more activity in the brain. We regard that as far more important. But also, it gets locked into your long-term memory far more effectively. Now, one of the important things this is, especially for people in long-term relationships, husband and wife, parent and child, brothers, sisters. This is important is because as life goes on, we are remembering all the negativity. And the positivity is just flowing past because the brain is not seeing that as something that's essential for its survival mechanism. It doesn't assign the importance and it doesn't store it. So, you can see, imagine a husband and a wife arguing, and one of them is going to say, you remember the year we got married? What did you do? You remember on our honeymoon what happened? All those things are still fresh. And maybe you married for 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years, but all you have is a collection of bad memories. And they may be even spanning over to 30 years. And maybe there's one every 5 years, but that's what's foremost in our minds. All right? Now, remember in the last one we said that the disease of the 21st century is stress, cortisol. So if this is the way the brain is wired, our first move is always towards negativity. Now, I want to explain something to you. It's important. If I lose you, just stop me. I'll try and re-explain it, inshallah. One of the most important indicators now in modern science is something they call heart rate variability. Now, what that basically means is, it is the difference in between each heartbeat. You know, if you measure your heart and you think your heartbeat is beating at 60 beats per second, then our normal assumption is that our heart is beating every second. But it's not functioning that way. Normally when you inhale, it's speeding up, and when you exhale, it's slowing down. But the heart has an intrinsic rate. That means it has a rate at which it normally beats at. Okay? But remember, we've got two parts. We've got the active part and the calming part. The calming part is like brakes on a car. Imagine a car is rolling down a hill, and as you're getting down to the bottom of the hill, because there's a bend, you applying the brakes. So the car is constantly moving, but it's slowing. So in our heartbeat, if we have this slowing part, if the vagus nerve is activating and it's slowing down, then this gives us a high heart rate variability. And this is an indicator of good health, which means our bodies are actively calming ourselves. If this is not activated, or if the system is sped up by cortisol, then you can imagine what happens. We start to have a low heart rate variability, and this is like speeding downhill towards a bend. Okay? Now, depending on your heart rate variability, you have a particular kind of heart rhythm. So, when you have low HRV, then your heart rhythm is erratic, like the top one. So, negative emotions, this is what it does to our heart rate. You can see the top one here. Okay? But when we have a high HRV, which is brought on by, amongst other things, exercise, but most importantly, positive emotions like appreciation. What it does is, it gives the heart rhythm a very regular pattern. Now, the important thing about this pattern, let's just look at it here. So if we look at the left-hand side of this line, if we have low heart rate variability, the first thing that gets affected is your breathing. As you can see in the top one there, that's respiration. And beneath it, your blood pressure. So you're starting to have, or starting to suffer, the first symptoms of ill health, or the first causes of ill health. But if we can get our heart rate variability, like you see in the middle block here, to be regular, then look what it does to our breathing, and look what it does to our blood pressure. Now, what they've discovered in experiments, like at the Heart Math Institute, is that the most powerful way to bring your heart variability up is through positive emotions. So let's just look at this graph. If you see on the top there, it shows relaxation. Because normally some of us, we say, well, I need to relax. Okay? And we think that that's good for us. Or we want to only concentrate on things that will regulate our breathing, for example. But you can see what it does there. It gives us still a low heart rhythm. But when we have positive emotion, we have, as you see at the bottom here, we have high, or rather a very regular, coherent heart rhythm. Now, when your heart rhythm is in this coherent phase, your brain, your mind, if we can call it, your spirit, your physical heart and your physical body are all functioning at its optimal level. It's the best phase to solve problems, to positively impact those around you. Now, why this is important is that if we sometimes doing something, so let's look now, we're looking at this statement of Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah is a statement of gratitude and awe and respect. Okay? When we look at the human being, science is saying that first of all, awe. You know, when a human being connects to something greater than him and herself, it has the most powerful effect on his body. And in terms of gratitude, they say if all the positive emotions were currencies, the most valuable one would be gratitude. So if we have a statement that can bring both awe and gratitude within us at the same time, look what a powerful physiological effect it has on us. But if we have to say the statement without mindfulness, it will not have any effect. So basically, if language is the interface, then positive language with mindfulness, what it generates for us is coherence or light or nur. And bad language or negativity will bring about darkness or dhulm or incoherence. So now let's go back to the statement, Alhamdulillah. It's amazing that the first statement of the Qur'an is a statement of positivity. Allah is saying before anything, you have to be positive. What a gift from our Creator. Now let's go and look at the virtues and analyze this statement. So, Alhamdulillah, the Prophet ﷺ said, Walhamdulillahi tamla'ul mizan. That Alhamdulillah, it fills the scales. It's such a important and heavy concept. The Prophet ﷺ, he says in a hadith in Tirmidhi, he says the best dhikr is La ilaha illallah. Because there is no greater truth in the universe than La ilaha illallah. And he says, Afdalud du'a, Alhamdulillah. The best dua is Alhamdulillah. Now we're going to come back because the first thing we ask, well, how can Alhamdulillah be how can it be a dua? We just said just now it's gratitude. But we're going to come back to that inshallah. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Allah does not grant a servant a favor for which he says Alhamdulillah, except that the Alhamdulillah is greater than what he was given. So I hope we're starting to develop like we were introduced to A'udhu Remember, A'udhu is our shield. And Bismillah is our weapon. And now we're starting to learn that the Fatiha is the aim of that weapon. So in the Arabic language, there are no pure synonyms. Each word, if it's a different word, there's some difference in the, or nuance in the meaning. So in Arabic, we have to look at the words that are similar in order to totally understand this word. If we want to understand Alhamdulillah or Hamd, we have to look at words that are similar. Now, the synonyms for Hamd are Madh, Thana, Majd, and Shukr. So let's look at Madh is to praise only with the tongue. You know, you see people go to weddings, say, you're looking good today. But in reality, you don't mean it. That's Madh. When I was rehearsing my speech this morning, my grandson was standing next to me. So I said, an example of Madh is to say to somebody, you look very nice today. And he stood next to me and he smiled. He thought I'm saying it to him. And so that was Madh because I didn't really mean it. But then I looked at him, he had a nice tracksuit on. And then I said to him, you really look nice today. And so that is Thana, is to admire and praise someone. So you're praising them now because you admire them. And Majd is to exalt and be in awe of someone. You know, for people that like football, they say, well, Messi, for example, he is the greatest footballer. So you exalt him and you're in awe of him because of his one skill. We'll come back to that also. And then Shukr is to thank. And Ibn Qayyim, he says, Shukr has to be based on 5 pillars. Humility to the one thanked. You know, I just thought sometimes we go to maybe convenience store and the assistant helps you and they give you the change and you just say thanks and take it. But that thanks is not even a thanks of sincerity or humility. We've caused ourselves a loss. So shukr has to be humility to the one thanked. There has to be love for him. You have to acknowledge the blessing. You have to praise him for it, and you should not use it in his disobedience. So hamd has to be said with the tongue. But if this was enough, then that would just be madh. Now I want you to think, all of us, sometimes salah finishes, we want to read Subhanallah, Alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, 33, 33, 34. But how are we reading? Subhanallah, 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 Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. What's happening? First of all, your heart rate's not going anywhere, you know. But who's the recipient? Who's the recipient of this statement? Does Allah need it? We, the recipients of it. The minimum is to say Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. And try and think of something that you're grateful for with each Alhamdulillah. Because the poet praises the kings and rulers, but he doesn't mean it. He just wants something from them. So now we know that hamd must include sincerity and love. And hamd is for the one whose attributes are worthy of praise. When someone has acquired some skill or talent, we praise him. Like we said about the soccer player. So what still if the object of your praise has perfect and excellent qualities in all respects? We may admire Lionel Messi because he's a good football player. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, الَّذِي أَحْسَنَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقًا. Everything is perfected. Now what still if the object of your praise has chose all of those qualities for himself? You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ibadi inni haramtu dhulma ala nafsi. O my servant, I have forbidden oppression upon myself. Imagine that. Allah owns us. He can do whatever He wants to with us, but He says, I have forbidden it for myself. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Kataba ala nafsi ya rahmah. I have decreed upon myself, rahmah, mercy. So this implies that one should be filled with awe and love and gratitude and humility and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if the one being praised has perfect qualities, this implies that we should have rida, we should have contentment with Allah's decree even if we don't understand it. This is what we were talking about, the story of Khidr and Musa. So if we understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we should then accept whatever He decides for us. This is why in the hadith the Prophet ﷺ says if something good happens to a believer, Hamidallahu rabbahu wa shakara. He thanks Allah, he praises Allah and thanks Him. And if something bad happens to him, he says Hamidallahu rabbahu wa sabara. He still praises Allah and he makes sabr. Why? He doesn't understand the wisdom behind. This is why the Prophet ﷺ, if something happened to him which was difficult, he would say Alhamdulillahi ala kulli hal. All praise is due to Allah under every circumstance. And if we understand Alhamdulillah, there should be no questioning the divine wisdom. Because all praise is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what kind of praise still, if someone does a good to us, we thank them, right? This is personal gratitude. But if that someone does good to us, to our families, to humanity, to every creature and creation, then what sort of shukr is due? I mean, even the Alhamdulillah is not sufficient. You know, just so the Prophet ﷺ says that Dawood alayhi salam complained to Allah. He said, Ya Allah, how can I make shukr to you? Because I have to thank you for giving me the ability to thank you. And so Allah said, Ya Dawood, that is shukr. That realization that you actually can't thank me, that is thanking me. So shukr has three parts. We have to feel it in the heart, express it on the tongue, and then demonstrate it in action. Now you just think how we loosely throw this word around. How's business? Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. No real thought behind it. So Ibn Qayyim, he says that Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen is a statement of fact. It's independent of time and validation. It doesn't need us. This is a statement, it's a universal statement. Now let's go and look, because the Prophet ﷺ, he called this statement also, he called it a dua, afdalu dua, Alhamdulillah. So why is it that the ulama have said that this statement, it also includes insha. Insha is desire. So when we say Alhamdulillah, first of all, we're thanking Allah and acknowledging Him, but at the same time, we're making a dua to Allah to allow us to live according to the understanding of Alhamdulillah. So this implies, if one does not understand Alhamdulillah, then how can you desire it? And how can you live according to it? Without understanding it, what we're expressing is madh. Alright? The Prophet ﷺ, he says that Allah does not pay attention to a dua that's made with an absent heart. There has to be presence when we're calling Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can only have presence if we have understanding. So now let's look at the al. The al in Alhamdulillah. The al denotes that each and every praise is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's called istigharat in Arabic. That means exclusivity. So what it means is, if we see anything beautiful, you see a good car, the praise is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know from our quantum studies that not even an atom moves and exists without the knowledge and the control of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So a human being, if he designs something or he makes something, first of all, every one of the 100 trillion atoms in his body is functioning only by the permission of Allah. And then he only has that ability because Allah gave it to him. وَمَا تَوْفِيقِي إِلَّا بِاللَّهِ. No one has the ability to accomplish anything except for Allah. So anything you see, a beautiful building, a car, a person, clothing, whatever it is, the praise is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So similarly, if somebody does some good to you, the primary cause was Allah. So the praise is for Him. But Allah teaches us that you cannot thank Allah if you can't thank man. So now, because Alhamdulillah is a statement of fact, it's a universal reality that is not dependent on anyone or anything. And this praise is due to Allah irrespective. You know, if people go out in nature and they see a beautiful mountain, whether they say beautiful mountain, beautiful ocean, if they don't attribute that praise to Allah, it doesn't matter. The mere fact that you say that thing is beautiful, the praise is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was the only one worthy of praise before He created and after it. Therefore, in the latter part of Al-Fatiha, remember in Fatiha, when we come, we say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ. You alone, we worship. وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينُ. You alone, we ask for help. But in the opening of the Fatiha, we don't say, نَحْمَدُ or Ahmadullah. We're not saying that. Allah is already teaching us that, look, whether you say it or not is not important. The praise is mine. Alright? And we need the praise. Why? We just showed we need that coherency. We need that positivity to come inside. So now contrast that to the way we think. When we're reading tasbih, we think we're doing Allah a favor. But in reality, this is a favor from Allah upon us. So this Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Qur'an, وَلَوُ الْحَمْدُ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. His is the praises in the heavens and the earth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He honors His servant by hearing His praises. So this is why I say, Sami Allahu liman hamida. Allah listens to the one who praises it. Rabbana wa lakal hamd. When you're saying that, it's actually a favor that Allah is giving you His attention. Now, if we really understand it, then we have to praise Allah. Praise Him and have this admiration for Him, which is thana. But like we said earlier, we don't have that capacity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, or in the dua, Anta kama athnayta ala nafsika. Allah is as only He can praise Himself. He's the only one worthy to praise Himself. But what we should do is make it a lifelong ambition to attempt to do justice to Alhamdulillah and live by it. So now if we grasp the fact that this one statement, it encompasses all the might and grandeur of Allah, then it has to be said with so much of awe and conviction. So Alhamdulillah, we now understand, is a heavy concept and it's a philosophy of life. Alright, and this is why the Prophet ﷺ says in the hadith, Alhamdulillah tamla'ul mizan. It fills or it's heavy on the scales. Now, if this is the beauty and the depth of Alhamdulillah, again, with what state of mind should we be saying it? We should never be rattling through these remembrances like we've been doing till before we came here. You know, this should be like a motto for us in our everyday lives. The beauty of the Qur'an and the power and wisdom of Allah is that in the first word, the Qur'an introduces a word which is also a concept that clearly outlines for the person seeking guidance his relationship with Allah in that first word of the Qur'an. So this implies we should be opening this book with a feeling of praise and appreciation and gratitude and submission and an awesome respect for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now the next thing we go to Lillahi, Alhamdulillah. This lam in Lillahi is a lam of ikhtisas. Allah is again emphasizing, remember we had the al was istikharaq, the al was showing that praises are only for Allah. But now Allah is re-emphasizing with the lam, Lillahi, it's exclusively for Allah. Don't think that it can be for someone else. It is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now in Arabic, there's a concept called apposition. So you know, if you say in English, for example, you say, a bird, an eagle soared above me. You got one noun explaining another noun. So what follows is explaining what came first. So when we look at the Fatiha, it's the same thing. Rabbul Alameen is explaining Alhamdulillah. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim is explaining Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Maliki Yawmiddin will explain to us Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. So now we have to go to the statement that's going to explain or elaborate for us on Alhamdulillah, which is Rabbil Alameen, Lord and owner of everything. So let's look, in Arabic we said every word has a different meaning. And there are no perfect synonyms in Arabic. Right? The only perfect is the name Allah. Remember, the name of Allah contains, all the other names of Allah are contained in this name Allah. Now sorry, we did Lillahi. We're not doing Allah because we did it in the Bismillah. And remember, we said in the Bismillah, Allah, the word Allah for the Arabs, so Allah is the thing that you hold most valuable in your heart. That's what Allah is. So let's look at now the synonyms for this word Rabb. The first synonym is owner and authority. The next one is perfecter and creator. Murabbi is the one that brings something up perfectly. Rabb is the nourisher and the sustainer. Rabb implies ma'bud, that is, we are the marbub, the ones that worship. Just to see Ibn Taymiyyah, he has a similar opinion. He says Rabb means marabbi, it means creator, sustainer, nourisher, helper, and guide. According to At-Tabari, it means a master without equal, the one that arranges the affairs of his creatures. In fact, in his tafsir, he says one of the other names of, or meanings of Rabb is muslih al-shay, the one that rectifies everything, and the owner and the command belongs to him. Now, Murabbi implies creation just as a father originates via sperm, but Allah is the creator or the originator of the father and his offspring. And just like a father takes care of the needs of his child, the Rabb takes care of the needs of all of his servants' needs. Now, Rabb not only creates, but he also perfects. Alladhi ahsana kulla shay'in khalaqa. Now, the Rabb sustains and nourishes whatever he has created, taking care of things they are aware of and unaware of. So I want us to start to understand that Rabb is taking care of everything that we need, whether we're asking or not asking. So let me go back to the statement of Alhamdulillah, that we say we should be pleased with Allah under any circumstance. But now we're learning that Allah is taking care of all of our needs, whether we're asking or not. So if something is happening to us, though we may not understand the wisdom, it's actually the Rabb taking care of us. What's happening is actually what we need. Right? So the Rabb provides slaves with what they ask for and do not ask for. So for example, if we ask Allah to help us digest our food, or to lubricate our eyes, no, we haven't asked us. But Allah is doing that for us anyway. So Rabb, the creator, sustainer, provider, is the only power to be petitioned. If we ask anyone else, it's not the best way to achieve what we're seeking. This is implying tawakkul should be only on the owner of something. In Surah Al-Shu'ara, Fir'aun, he says to Musa, قَالَ فِرْعَوْنُ وَمَا رَبُّ الْعَالَمِينَ. Who's the Rabbul Alamin? And what does Musa say? قَالَ رَبُّ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ. The Lord of the heavens and the earth, وَمَا بَيْنَهُمَا, and whatever is in between. إِن كُنْتُم مُوقِنِينَ. If indeed you had yaqeen. Now the question is, do we have that yaqeen? Who's the Lord of everything? We're sitting, all of us, in depression in South Africa in 2019 with all the politics, but our yaqeen should be in who? In Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is going to happen without His permission. And if difficulty is afflicting us, it may be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something from us for our benefit in the next dimension. Now, Allah, Rabb is the Khaliq. Alright, but Allah is not only the creator, He's the possessor of authority also. And it's very important that Allah use this word instead of saying Khaliqul Alameen. Because if I ask anyone here, does anyone believe that Allah is not the creator? No one will deny that. But if I ask everyone, will everyone be for Fajr in the morning tomorrow? Maybe not. Why? We don't have that response to the authority of Allah. You see? So Allah, in using this word, Rabb, is already saying, hey, understand, I created you and I have the authority over you. You have to submit to me. So Namrud, imagine, Namrud didn't say he's the creator, but he said, Ana uhi wa umit. I'm the one that gives life and gives death. I can kill you. And the Quraysh, they knew about Allah, but they gave the amr to their idols. Now we, many of us, Muslims, we know Allah is the creator, but we give the amr to, we give the command everywhere else. We look at the kuffar, everything we want to do is to mirror the way they're doing it, the way they're doing business, everything we always saying the way they're doing it, and then that's what we want to follow. So we recognize Allah is the creator, but we don't recognize His authority over us. Now Imam Razi, he says that Allah has many creatures, but He treats man as if he is His only creation. For me, Allah treats me as if I'm His only creation. And for Adil or Abdullah, whoever is here, each one, Allah treats each of us as if we are the most important to Him. He says, but man has only one Rabb, but he worships many others besides Allah. So, Rabb has the command, and this is why many of the du'as of the Anbiya in the Qur'an start with the word Rabbana. You know, like Zakaria says, وَلَمْ أَكُنْ بِدُعَائِكَ رَبِّ شَقِيًّا. I have not been unblessed in my dua to you. Now, if one understands this, then our tawakkul should only be in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is the Rabb? If we understand rububiyyah correctly, then this will lead to uluhiyyah. That means we will only worship Allah. We will not put our hope in anything else but Allah. Now, when man is asked, he becomes irritated. But the Rabb, he becomes pleased. Take the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ says, Man la yas'alillah yaghdab alayh. If you don't ask Allah, He becomes angry with you. Imagine that. So any person will suffer a decrease as a result of continuously giving even if he's wealthy, but Allah's treasury never decreases. Why? Rabbul Alamin is the Lord of everything. And so the Prophet ﷺ says, whoever possesses the following three qualities will taste the sweetness of Iman. That is pleased with Allah as his Rabb. Islam is his deen, and the Prophet ﷺ as his messenger. Now, hamd, we have to ask, does if you open English Qur'an, it says all praise is due to God. Alhamdulillah. Does that word praise do justice to the word hamd? No. And then you say Lord of the worlds. Does this word Lord do justice to the word Rabb? No. So just last point, when asking Allah, He gives us what we need, not necessarily what we ask for. Now let's look at Alamin. So we looked at Rabb, we look at Alamin. Alamin, so the word Alam in Arabic is a plural. If you want to say all of human beings, you say Alamul Ins. If you say all the jinn, Alamul Jinn. But Alamin means the collection of the collections. So it's a plural of the plural. There's no such a thing in English. Okay? So it's a collection of the collections. So Alamin, first of all, is Lord of the collection of all the humans, of all the jinn, of all the trees, of all the plants, of all the insects, all the animals, all the bodies of water, all the grains of sand, whatever all the planets, whatever, stars. Allah is the Lord of all of that. Another name of Alam in Arabic is a sign. So every single thing in creation is pointing to the fact that it's created purposefully and that it's created by an all-knowing and all-wise, all-powerful creator. In fact, when we look at the Qur'an, Allah is drawing our attention to everything we see around us and then making a connection to mindfulness. So when you see the birds, Allah says, أَوَلَمْ يَرُوا إِلَى الطَّيْرِ صَافَّاتٍ وَيَقْبِضْنَ. Don't you see the birds opening and folding their wings? مَا يُمْسِكُهُنَّ إِلَّا رَحْمَنٌ. None holds it up except Allah. So whenever we see birds, our mind should be going to Allah. When we look at the dry vegetation, Allah is saying, your mind should come back to creation, or the lush vegetation, or water, or the palm trees, everything around us, Allah is using as a sign to direct us towards Him. So the absolute order of everything points to the absoluteness and the oneness of the Creator. So therefore Allah is the Lord of the signs. Each and everything in the universe is a sign pointing towards its owner and its master. And Allah says, إِنَّ فِي خَلْقِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافِ اللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ لَآيَاتِ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. In the creations of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of day and night are signs for people who have understanding. So everything Allah has made as a sign. Now Allah is Lord of all creation and not only a certain people. Alright? Like the Jews, they believe that God is, they said God is the God of Israel. And all of us were meant to serve them. But what does this imply? Think of this deeply. This implies that Allah is not only the Rabb of the Muslims. Allah is not the Rabb of the Muslims. Who is He? Rabbul Alameen. Now, let's go back. Who's the Rabb? The Rabb is the one that takes care of the needs of His servants without asking. Okay? All His creatures. So, if you want to be an abd of this Rabb, what do you need to do? You need to be taking care of the needs of the creation of the Rabb. But what do we sometimes do? We think, well, because we're Muslim, we can have some kind of concession. But what we don't understand, that in itself is going against the concept of Rububiyyah. We have no preference over anyone else. Right? And I mean, to make it even worse, we separate even within ourselves. The Muslim's biggest enemy is himself. And why is that? He doesn't understand. Rabbul Alameen. Now look at this. The Prophet ﷺ said, I will be the advocate of the oppressed disbeliever against the oppressive believer. And Ibn Taymiyyah, he says, Allah will support a just, disbelieving ruler against an unjust, believing ruler. Let's understand that. You see, we're complaining all the time of Donald Trump and whoever, and we have the complaint of the entire world. Just sit on a supper table and we got all the solutions to the world's problems. All right? But many of these governments to their people are more just than the Muslim governments are to their people. And then we should take it one because that's on a macro level. Let's go on a micro level and let's look at the Muslims themselves. How do we treat each other? We have this high expectation from the kuffar that they should treat us fairly. But how do we treat each other? Is the honor of each of us, is it sacred? We won't even think. You'll hear something. Musa complained because he saw. Muslims will make all kinds of stories because they heard. You heard what that guy is doing at the Islamic schools? Giving tafsir there and teaching people crazy things. And Ramadan will come and the shaitan will be out. And then this is what people are discussing. Astaghfirullah. Alright? So, forgetting this fact leads to racism, to tribalism, to nationalism, culturalism, and factionalism. Isn't this the disease afflicting us today? I mean, first we want to divide ourselves into which part of the Muslim world you come from. And if you come today for us from the Indo-Pak, then from which Gam you came from. And if you came from which Gam, then which Jamaat you following. And if you're in there, which topi you wearing. And which kurta you. Look at this. And then if you come into the town and we have all of those things, then which mosque you going to? It's ridiculous, right? And then we oppress the environment, we ill-treat the poor and needy, forgetting that our only status of them is the ni'mah of Allah upon us. And instead of being moved to gratitude, we move to arrogance. So we have this misunderstanding of a concept or the difference between servitude and service. Allah is the Rabb, and we are the Ibad. The duty of the Abd is to do whatever the Rabb wants. And now that you understand that the Rabb only wants you to do what's good for you, He's looking out for you, then Allah only wants you to do what's good for yourself. This is servitude. And the greatest honor a human being can have is to be an Abd of Allah. When Musa was traveling with Khidr we now know knew more than Musa, right? Musa is the greatest alim on the face of the earth. And Khidr knows more than him. And what does Allah say? فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا. He found a slave from our slaves. Allah didn't even tell us who he is. The honor is in that. Who is the greatest human being? The Prophet ﷺ. Has anyone reached higher than him physically or spiritually? No. On the Mi'raj, he went to the highest point. And spiritually he reached the highest point. But what Allah said? Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa. Glory be to Allah who carried his servant. Look at the honor. So the greatest honor is to be the Abd of Allah. To do whatever he wants. It's just in this verse Allah says, قَوْلٌ مَعْرُوفٌ وَمَغْفِرَةٌ خَيْرٌ مِّن صَدَقَةٍ يَتْبَعُهَا أَذًى. A good word of word of kindness and forgiveness is better than charity that's followed up by harm or reminders. Allah doesn't need that charity. He doesn't need our ibadah. We need it. Wallahu ghaniyun halim. Allah is ghani. He is rich, but He's compassionate. We poor, and we cruel, ungrateful. So we think we have some entitlement to Allah without paying homage and obedience to Him first. So the world is lacking this ihsan, which is the way Allah deals with His creation. If we can just understand Rabbul Alameen, what that means, and then say, well, we're going to behave as the Rabb of the Alameen demands, the problems of the world get solved. And look what Ibn Qayyim, he says, the deen itself is entirely good character. It's ihsan. This deen is ihsan. So whoever surpasses you in character or in ihsan has surpassed you in deen. This is the affair. So, furthermore, Allah doesn't even leave us there. Allah says, if we pay due to Allah and His commands, He has a special branch of His rububiyyah for the mu'minin. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ. Indeed, successful are the believers. Further, Allah says, who are they? أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْوَارِثُونَ. They will inherit what? الَّذِينَ يَرِثُونَ الْفِرْدَوْسِ. They will inherit Firdaus, hum fiha khalidun, and you'll stay there forever. So we must recognize Allah's dominion over everything. And this indicates to us that we are responsible for everything we have accepted the responsibility over. Everything is our business in this world. We have to uphold the sanctity of all of the earth itself, of all the creatures, the trees, the animals, the environment. The Prophet ﷺ says, the earth is your mother. Walk gently upon her. Now, for everything we learn, there must be a take-home. Imam Shafi'i says, knowledge is not that which is memorized, but that which benefits. So, we have to take home something from this, which inshallah we can implement. There's something Adil and Hussein always say to me at the end of lecture, give us something we can take home. So this is something I found in a psychology article, and I found it, inshallah, beneficial, especially for what we're discussing today. So the 4 pillars of meaning are basically 4 pillars which will help us to develop and enhance meaning within our lives. And these 4 pillars, the first one is belonging. The second one is purpose. The third one is self-esteem or storytelling. And the fourth is transcendency. So let's quickly discuss each of them. Belonging. And when you talk of belonging, we're talking of social belonging. So we know people have a natural sense and longing to belong. If you travel overseas and you meet someone from South Africa, all of a sudden the two of you are moving together. Or you support a team and you meet someone that's supporting the same team, there's an affinity. We start. Anything we find common, we're always looking for reasons to get together. It's only in the mosques we look for a reason to get apart. So, whether it be team supporters or tribes or nations, races, guilds, families or spouses, people, they feel a sense of safety in belonging to groups. If a person's alone at a train station and then they see another commuter, all of a sudden they feel a bit safer because someone else is there. So this is the greatest thing that Shaitan wants to snatch from us. He wants us to become more and more individualistic. Now, this is just a story, I don't know if but quickly, this is a story of a nurse. This nurse qualified, and she was put into a nursing home. And the first patient she was given was a revert Muslim. An elderly man, he was in his 80s, he had Alzheimer's, and she had to look after him. So they said, this is a Muslim man, you should look after him. And so she didn't know much about Islam, so she went on to a website called Pel Talk, and they said, well, he needs to eat halal. But she found something amazing. This man had Alzheimer's, but she said every day at a certain time, you change his direction, and then start reciting something in another language and do some funny kind of movements. So she went on to Pel Talk and they said, this man is praying. And she said, I didn't really believe it, but I went on to YouTube and I saw, well, this is the way Muslims pray. But I was surprised. This man has got Alzheimer's and yet he has this presence of mind. So I went and back on to Pel Talk and they said, you should go down to the local masjid. And so she says, I went down to the local masjid. I met the Imam and his wife, and I found myself for about 5 months going continuously back then. And then they gave me a Qur'an and I read the story of the bee An-Nahl, and I was blown away. I'd not read anything so beautiful. And after a couple of months, I had a knock on the door one day, and when I opened it was the Imam and his wife. And they said, we came to inquire, do you have any doubts about Islam? She said, no. So they said, well, why aren't you embracing Islam? And she said, I realized at that point I don't have anything against it. And so I took the Shahada and I went back to my patient. And I said to him, I'm Muslim, and the two of us, we were shedding tears together. And she says, a short while later, he passed away. But I realized that this man, even in that state, Allah had sent him to me to give me light. And this is a lesson for us, right? It doesn't matter your age. It doesn't matter your financial situation or where you come from. What's important is this light, the light inside of us. Keep the mirror clean. Keep the language positive and keep the light alive. Because at the end of our lives, when the angels come to take us, what they come to look for is the quality of that light. This is the important thing. So she says, this is Allah kept light inside of this man. And what drew me to him was that although he was alone, it seemed like he was belonging to something greater to him than himself. It was just this act of the salah. And she passed away incidentally, and she had no family. It was only her and her brother. She passed away a few years later, but just before she passed away, she gave da'wah to her brother, and he became Muslim. Alright? So, understanding rububiyyah and belonging, don't compare. You have what the Rabb knows is good for you, and somebody else has what the Rabb knows is good for them. Don't compare. You are going against this concept of rububiyyah, and you're creating a distance between you and people you should actually be coming closer to. Remember, Allah, He loves us. Alright? So, Rabb should always evoke feelings of love and awe. And, well, this is a study they did in Australia. They took people, over the age 1,477, people over the age of 70. And they found that people that have good social connections, and didn't necessarily mean family, that had good friendships, people that they could go outward and talk to, lived much longer than people that don't. In fact, people that didn't have that amongst men would die twice as early, and women 3 times more likely to die. There's another study at the University of Vancouver, and this has involved 400,000 people, and they found that people that live in societies that have high life satisfaction, that means first world countries, are unhappy. Then they have high suicide rates. And why they found that is because their lives become more individualistic. They start to socialize less. They keep less contact. It's just a man, his wife, and his children. Or maybe just a man, his wife, and the dog. Or the cat. Alright? This is وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِ فَإِنَّ لَوْ مَعِيشَةً تَنْكَرُ. If you turn away from my remembrance, I give you a constricted life. You can be living in New York or wherever, but look how you're living. Alright? And they found people that live in poor countries, they have the highest level of happiness and meaning and purpose in their life. People like in Niger and Eritrea and these countries. So, there's, you can see 1945, René Spitz, a psychoanalyst, psychologist in an orphanage in France, they found that the children were dying. They were isolating the children to protect them from disease, but in spite of this, the children were dying. And eventually they found that they were just lacking human contact and touch. And when they put them back in touch with people, the survival rates improved. So this is again, people in wealthy societies are preoccupied with their careers and tend to be very individualistic. The resulting isolation has led to a loss of meaning in their lives. Now look at this. A 1985 study found that Americans reported 3 meaningful discussions every 6 months. And in 2004, it dropped to 0. Alright? So, Alhamdulillah, this is a meaningful discussion that we're having. So, connecting to others and having a sense of belonging is essential for a meaningful life. It's tied into our physiology. Now, look at this. This is a recent study. Some of you may have seen it. This was carried out by the University of Mannheim in Germany. And what they found is that Muslims have the highest life satisfaction because of this sense of oneness. Oneness with their Creator and oneness with each other. And they found that one of the most important things for them is attending a religious service in congregation. All right? Now, this is a psychologist. He wrote this book. It says, Timeless, Nature's Formula for Health and Longevity. I just took out 2 quotes, right? Just look at it. He says, we build the brains of our children through our interactions with them. And we keep our own brains growing and changing throughout life by staying connected to others. People who lead extraordinarily long lives are those who have maintained close ties to others. So the first thing I want us to learn from Rabbul Alameen is belonging. Okay? The next thing, remember the second purpose then, or the second pillar of meaning is purpose. And I mean, what can I say? The purpose, ihsan. Balance, to ihsan. This is the deen. Alright? Now, purpose, it involves contributing meaningfully to other people's lives. It involves switching your focus. Now, this is an experiment in America. I think we did this before. They took janitors that were working in a hospital and they called them in and they said, look, you people are an important part of the healing of the patients. By you keeping the floors clean and creating a comfortable environment, this actually assists the patients in recovering better. And they found that this had such a high effect of happiness and even positive health on those janitors. So when we have a purpose and we work towards that purpose and we can assess or measure that we're making a difference, that has a physiological effect on us. Now remember, purpose, living a meaningful life. Well, let's just look at living a meaningful life means emitting and leaving light behind that will shape the reality and therefore the lives and history of those amongst us and those that will follow until the end of time. If we just look at that story of the lady Cassie, she's left a light behind that we enjoyed now. All right? But finding and maintaining balance is the purpose of life, and we said ihsan you can find everywhere. If you make ihsan your purpose, you bring ihsan into your kitchen, into your home, into your business, into your school, into the way you deal with people, into your community, everywhere. Because everything has been created with ihsan. And when one behaves with ihsan, one is restoring things to their natural state. Allah says, Alladhi ahsana kulla shay'in khalaqa. Everything He created with ihsan. So when you behave with ihsan, you are returning things to their natural state. The third thing is self-esteem or storytelling. Your story about yourself. Now, storytelling, they say, is about creating positive inner meanings. All right? And to renew your inner strength and your motivation to live meaningfully. So listen to it. It says, people who can create positive stories of their lives and how certain decisions or events change the course of their lives often have more meaningful lives. So, often person will say, when this happened to me, I decided to change. And since that day, I have not missed this or whatever. You see that as something that has added some value to yourself. And they say an effective strategy is using a process called counterfactual thinking. Now, counterfactual thinking is asking yourself questions which help you to appreciate what you have. So, for example, remember, negativity makes you think of the negative things. All right? So, take the man, for example, he should think, well, what if I didn't have a wife? What if she doesn't make breakfast for me? What if she doesn't make supper for me? What if she doesn't take care of my house for me? What happens? Life ends. And the woman, what if I didn't have a husband, or a house, or a car, or children, and so on and so on. Instead of looking at what we don't have, we start to look at what we have. And important, your own story, ask yourself what people will say about you at your funeral. I mean, really, each of us ask ourselves what it is people will say about us when we die. It'll give you an indication of your story. The best story, as we said earlier, is to be وَعِبَادُ الرَّحْمَنِ الَّذِينَ يَمْشُونَ عَلَى الْأَرْضِ هَوْنًا. Be an ibad of Allah. Who are the ibad? The ibad are the ones that behave with ihsan to the alamin. There's your story and your purpose and the belonging. Okay, all in one. So why self-esteem is important? You have a piece of flesh in your brain here, it's called a hippocampus. And they say it's involved in autobiographical memory. The memory, your memories of yourself. So in other words, your self-identity or self-esteem. Now, the hippocampus seems to be the circuitry. What they found is that people that have healthy hippocampi, they also have very healthy immune systems. And if they found people with compromised immune systems, they had compromised or weak hippocampi. And so they found people that have a high level of self-esteem have healthy hippocampi. And then obviously good health. So your story to yourself is important for your own health. So storytelling is about self-esteem and how you feel about yourself. This has been found to be crucial for hippocampus health, optimism, relaxation, joy, and gratitude. In fact, they find people that are grateful are more charitable, which in turn is crucial for overall health. And low esteem is linked to alcoholism, smoking, drug addiction, cardiovascular disease, etc. Now lastly, we look at transcendence. The ability to connect to something greater than yourself. All right? And this is what the Fatiha is. It's connecting us. Remember, we said in Salah that the Prophet ﷺ says, Allah says, قَسَّمْتُ الصَّلَاةَ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنَ عَبْدِي. I've divided the Fatiha between myself and my slave. إِذَا قَالَ الْعَبْدُ Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, قَالَ اللَّهُ حَمَّدَنِي عَبْدِي. If you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, Allah responds, my Lord, my servant has praised me. And Ibn al-Qayyim says, so wait, after you say Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin, wait for Allah's response. So it's connecting you to something greater than yourself. It's about realizing that one is a tiny part of the whole. You know, we're like a small part in a machine, but that small part wants to control the machine. This is who man is. It's about experiencing a higher reality wherein everything is connected. When in a transcendental state of mind, one state of fear and anxiety between yourself and the world around you begins to dissolve. All of a sudden, we don't have these suspicions and these fears because we connected to the one that's controlling everything. All ihsan and virtue are manifestations of Allah's qualities and light. So when we perform these acts, when you're cooking even a pot of food with ihsan, you're manifesting a quality of Allah. When you speak to somebody kindly, it doesn't matter whether you know them or not, you're manifesting a quality of Allah. When you demonstrate patience or forgiveness, even to someone on the road who you don't know, you're demonstrating a quality of Allah and you producing light with the permission of Allah. Now, most important, imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Allahu fi awni al-abdi. Allah is in the service of the servant. Ma kana al-abdu fi awni akhi. As long as the servant is serving his brother. Can there be any greater example of transcendence? That you get Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to serve, we get him to serve us. So, we have the power over our minds, not outside events. This is what Marcus Aurelius says. He says, realize this and you will find strength. And then he further says, he says, the happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts. And this is the purpose of the Fatiha, to get our inner language corrected and to develop the sense of belonging, the sense of purpose, the sense of self-esteem and transcendence within us. So Imam Ghazali finally says, a person will always interpret everything he hears according to the light which dominates his heart. And lastly, Rumi says, we carry inside us the wonders we seek outside us. We're looking for everything everywhere else, but it's inside of us. And it's this Qur'an that will help us to uncover that. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم.